My remarks are pretty short. I'm Fife Symington. In 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
On March 13th, 1997, from the hours of 7:55 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., a series of lights were spotted over the southwestern United States of Arizona and Nevada, covering 300 miles from the Nevada border through Phoenix to the edge of Tucson. The official response was flares, but some claimed it was UFOs. This event became known as the Phoenix Lights. And in this video, we'll break it down into 5 parts: the event, witnesses, response, explanations, and the conclusion. And I've gathered some vetters to help me out. Let's begin. All right, vetters, it is time. The Phoenix Lights.
Finally, this evening we go to Arizona to dwell briefly on the unknown.
The first report of a strange flying object came at about 8:20 that night from a former police officer in Paulden, Arizona. Over the next 40 minutes, people gave similar reports of an object along a 200-mile route south to Phoenix and Tucson.
Think about mass sightings. Like, what was your take on, like, say, the Phoenix Lights?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Came right over the top, right down the street here.
Saw something more like this. Up close and personal, they say, and they're not alone.
An unidentified pilot flying near an airport in Arizona with his son when he spotted 6 lights in the night sky. Mystery unresolved.
Except I was the pilot.
No way.
Eventually, the Air National Guard claimed responsibility, stating that their pilots had been dropping flares.
Our unit was flying March 13th, 1997 as part of Operation Snowbird, and we were conducting night training.
At no point the lights disappear above the ridge of the mountain, and at no point the lights descend below the ridge of the mountain.
It was in this V pattern of the 5 lights, with the one light in the front and on the side, like a perfect V, coming at us.
His story hasn't changed.
It's not a story.
Listen, it was freaking huge. It was going really slow. It had these big lights in it. It was there. We saw it. There's no doubt in our minds whatsoever what we saw.
The time is about 10 o'clock, Sue?
Yes.
10 o'clock, March 13th, Thursday night.
Let's start with the basic facts of the Phoenix Lights. All right. The Phoenix Lights were a series of unidentified flying objects over the southwestern United States of Arizona and Nevada, covering roughly 300 miles from the Nevada border through Phoenix to the edge of Tucson. Would you agree with that, John?
Sounds right. From what I understand, even the edge of Nevada might not give it as much credit as how far it went. If you were to drive, I think it would be like a 450-mile drive. It would take like 7.5 hours. And I think the first sightings were from just outside of a city right next to Las Vegas called Henderson, Nevada.
Okay. Well, there you go. A little more context. Day and time. This took place back in the 90s. Yes, in the Flintstone days, y'all, for y'all young fellers out there. March 13th, 1997. Between the hours of roughly 7:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. respectively, Mountain Time, the time of that
Arizona
area.
time, yeah.
Where this took place. So, what is that accurate? What do you think, John? That seems
Yeah,
accurate.
I think some of the reports get confusing because the first sightings happening in just outside of Las Vegas, were reported at a certain time. But I think it's easier just to look at it from Arizona time, Mountain Standard Time, which, yes, I believe that the first sightings was just around 7 p.m. And the sightings going over Phoenix were around 8 o'clock to 8:30.
Oh, okay. But aren't there sightings later on at 10ish?
There was more sightings south of Phoenix around 10 o'clock, just after 10 o'clock.
So, because originally we had broken this down like there was 2 events, but the more I looked into it, there kind of a lot of events spread throughout
the whole state,
the whole time, right? This particular time and zone and area, and I just figured it'd be best to do it that way because there is a lot of. You could argue every witness's account is their own event. I wrote down a few things here that I find compelling, right, about the Phoenix Lights, and then you can help me add some more things in here. But to me, this is potentially the largest mass UFO sighting in U.S. history. Potentially thousands of witnesses to this event. Some describe the UFO as a mile wide. The governor changing his story also is quite fascinating, right? Coming out sort of downplaying it, and then later on coming out with his own sighting and report of what he saw, right? And he also saw a craft, so I find that very interesting.
And he went to humorous and controversial lengths not to stir the pot. He held a news conference after the Phoenix Lights to announce the mystery had been solved.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
In the alien costume, the governor's chief of staff.
Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
UFO enthusiasts were not amused, especially since the governor was believed to have seen nothing. But now he's coming out.
The growing hysteria intensified when the story broke nationally. And so I decided to lighten the mood of the state, and I called a press conference where I dressed up my chief of staff in a Martian outfit. It was meant to be a spoof, a good-natured spoof. That worked. We managed to lessen the sense of panic at the time, but I also upset quite a few of my constituents. Well, I'd like now to set the record straight. I never meant to ridicule anyone. My office did make inquiries as to the origin of the craft, but to this day they remain unanswered. I witnessed a massive delta-shaped craft that silently navigated over the Squaw Peak area in North Phoenix in the evening, and it was truly breathtaking. To my astonishment, it appeared to be a solid structure. It was huge. It had a very distinctive leading edge with huge embedded lights in it. And it was just traveling quietly, made no sound, through the Arizona night sky. I still don't know what it was. As a pilot and a former Air Force officer, I can definitively say that this craft did not resemble any man-made object that I'd ever seen.
One of the explanations for the Phoenix Lights is flares, and that caused thousands to think they saw a UFO in different shapes and sizes. That in and of itself is compelling enough for me that somehow flares would fool thousands of people, right? Potentially tens of thousands. So it's quite interesting to me. And look, there's a lot of numerous credible witnesses that make the story compelling. I'm not saying that they're what they think they saw is that, but the fact that there were a lot of credible people who saw something. What can't be denied is that something happened that night, right? Now, whatever it was, there's a lot of different explanations, but that is for certain something happened, and that is compelling. What else do you think?
I think just to tack onto that point, something happened there was thousands, at least 1,000, but many people called. They called the news channels, they called the newspaper, they called the police. That people even called Luke Air Force Base, which is a very large Air Force base just outside of Phoenix. Thousands of people were making these reports. And what I find interesting is that not one person was ever interviewed by a government agency.
What do you mean by that? One of the people that called, you mean?
Yeah, well, given the large nature of this incident and it happening across 250 plus miles, you would think that some formal investigation should have taken place. At least I think that's what would be a natural progression, but nobody was ever interviewed outside of tabloids or news reports or morning news. So why wouldn't the military or the government take something like this seriously when you have credible witnesses and when you have not even just credible, but when you have thousands of reports of this coming in such a short amount of time?
Right. Anything else we're leaving off of what makes this case so compelling, right? That people keep reporting on it, making videos, doing that, right, talking about it.
Well, one thing that I think makes it so compelling is that it is, like you said, arguably the largest sighting in U.S. history, and it's technically still unresolved. There's a lot of theories, and I think a lot of people still like to investigate this, but I don't think that there's one leading theory or explanation that has a true general consensus around it.
Just start naming different witnesses. I have Tim Lay. I hope I said that right.
Finally, this evening we go to Arizona to dwell briefly on the unknown. We admit, just a little suspicious.
The latest chapter into a strange valley encounter.
3 months ago tonight, something strange happened in the skies over Arizona that still hasn't been fully explained. And in reality, we may never know exactly what happened that night. Tonight, first on Fox, we hear from a Phoenix family who may have been closer to whatever it was in the sky, closer than anyone else.
It's getting closer and closer, and we're saying, that thing's coming right at us.
Witnesses who claim to have had a better look described a delta-shaped craft.
It was a perfect triangle just floating across the sky, way up there.
This family says it flew slowly and silently over their house.
The tip literally came right across our street, and the right arm went right over us, just like a subway train, watching it go by. The first light, the second light, third light.
A local special effects company created these computer-enhanced conceptions from videotapes and descriptions.
We have determined that this formation of lights, when it came to rest, was over a mile long.
The Lees first saw the lights while looking north from their home in the Sunny Slope Mountains.
When it finally got here and we realized this thing was coming right over us, we really started getting antsy. And then when it went direct overhead without a sound, it was like that. It was so big.
These images of what they saw are made on a computer. They're a combination of digital photos of the landscape taken by Lee and computer drawings of the objects his family saw in the sky.
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
You just didn't know what to do. It was just like, my God, how big is this thing? It didn't seem threatening because when it was right overhead and we couldn't hear a sound, it was like you're just awestruck.
Jim Delatoso has been researching UFOs for 20 years. Right now, he's in the middle of putting together a virtual reality model of what happened that night. He's talked to hundreds of witnesses about the night of March 13th, including the Lees.
He thinks that he said if he had a tennis ball, he could have hit it. He could have thrown a tennis ball at it. It was that close.
It was very close. He just could have nailed it.
I consider Tim Lee and his family to be very reliable and very important in the data that they've given us because they were so close that they could look up and, as they said, almost touch it.
The last light went right over my wife and I, and there was no light on the ground. But I could see up inside that it was almost like a recess, and it had fluorescent like light inside, like a gas light of some kind.
This is the first time in the series of reports of that night that someone said that they looked up and saw a structured object.
As it went over, It went straight like through this V right there, over that guy's house.
It took about 15 minutes to get from when we first saw it all the way till we couldn't saw it.
We just re-experience it every time we tell it. You know, it's like it was just yesterday. You know, we've just never seen anything like it.
I was always a very polite skeptic. I would never tell someone, if they told me they saw something, I would never say, you're a liar or anything like that, because I don't know. But now I don't know what to think, because this is impossible.
Bring up the eerie music, please.
People were seeing these lights that either seemed to be attached to something or had a force field in between, because when they looked up, they blocked out the stars in between the lights.
Dr. Lynn Kitai reflecting on what she saw back on March 13th, 1997, a string of lights shaped in a V hovering above the valley skies.
Going through my mind, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you.
That it was at least big as a football field, at least.
As it got closer, it got kind of spooky because there was no noise with it. It was completely silent.
No noise. Not a sound. Not a sound. Totally quiet.
You heard nothing. Absolutely nothing.
The Air Force told UPN News 13 it no longer investigates UFOs since Project Blue Book was closed in 1969. Barwood sent letters to senators looking for answers and was told the same thing.
They do not do investigations on UFOs. Now, what is interesting to me is in these days of terrorism, we don't have anybody investigating anything that invades our airspace.
Even a commercial airline pilot here at Sky Harbor Airport reported seeing the lights last night. He radioed the tower just after takeoff, telling them that the object was directly above him. That means that air traffic controllers in the tower should have picked the object up on their radar screens. And yet they say they saw nothing.
Okay, well, I think that's good then. For witnesses.
For the witness section.
The governor's press junket, if you will, was that the press release, right? Was that the thing? Which
I think that qualifies as the official statement.
What did all those people see passing over them in Phoenix that March 13th? And what was the huge light display at 10 o'clock at night? Former Phoenix City Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood is the only city official to look for answers, and she has paid a price for it. When Barwood proposed to her colleagues that they at least ask some questions, she was met with a stony, chilling silence.
Kind of curious, especially since people are starting to ask more questions. Thanks. Thank you. Councilman Siebert. After the meeting was over, one of the deputy city managers came over to me and said, you shouldn't have asked that question. And I said, why? And he said, well, you just opened Pandora's box. They didn't want to deal with it.
Barwood was shunned, ridiculed, poked fun at in political cartoons. Governor Fife Symington, on the verge of being indicted for bank fraud and misrepresentation, made a complete joke out of it.
Escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
Is there any other sort of official response, like the Air Force release a statement? Basically, no press releases, no statements.
Well,
or there were statements.
Well, I believe the Air Force did make an official statement. You'll have to find this one. Okay, so here's something to look into, and I might be able to help you find it. I know I came across it while I was doing research for the Phoenix Lights. The reason why we know that the second event that happened around 10:15 was flares was because a news reporter did end up contacting the PR official of the Air Force, who then revealed that the flare incident was something called Operation Snowbird. So that was an official statement from the Air Force.
I know the Maryland Air National Guard also made a statement in a news conference and even showed a map. I have video footage of that. I even have video footage of a news crew going out just days later after Phoenix Lights and watched another flare training exercise, and they filmed it, and it looks identical to the Phoenix Lights.
Well, it's a possible explanation into those mystery lights that appeared over the valley in March.
But some of you aren't buying it. 12 News has video that might explain what was going on.
Let's start with pictures that were taken on March 13th. Many of you saw this row of lights as they hovered above the valley horizon. Now, take a close look at these pictures that we shot just last night. These are flares that the Air Force was dropping near Gila Bend. Now let's go back to the video from March. You'll remember the lights faded out one by one. Let's take a look. You're going to see how they're slowly fading out one by one. And again, looking back at those flares from last night, they also burn out one by one. There they go.
Illumination flares like those recorded by KPNX on June 25th are used by military aircraft to light up battlefields and expose targets during night combat. Dropped from high-altitude aircraft and attached to tiny parachutes, the flares, which descend very slowly, can burn brightly for up to 5 minutes.
When we saw those lights pop on in the sky, to us they looked exactly the same. The photographer and I just looked at us and goes, well, there's your light.
Well, identical to the second part of the Phoenix lights.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I see. That's the thing. When you watch like news segments on it, they don't break it down into two different events.
Right.
That's
actually a really interesting point, because really I think there was two separate events, but looking back at it historically, things get mixed together.
And maybe that's where some of the confusion is of why these explanations don't line up, because there were two separate things going on.
Right.
And they get confused because any segment I watched, everything I looked into was all about these lights. That's it. No other things. So, oh, Marcus, how many you got here? Look at this guy. There we go. Marcus double fisting. All right. So yeah, that's interesting. All right. Well, we'll include that, right? That there's this, that's interesting. So,
well, I think that it's important to also note that we know it was two separate incidents because we can look at when the reports came in. We know reports came in across Arizona from like 7:22 to 8:30 from northern Arizona all the way over Phoenix. And then we also know the time of the incident that happened just southwest of Phoenix, which was the flare drop. And we know that the Air Force said that was us, or the Maryland National Guard rather said that was us. So they're admitting that whatever happened after 10 o'clock was them. Does that discredit the thousands of calls that were made to police and news outlets from 7 o'clock to 8:30? So I think that the Maryland National Guard taking credit for the second part sort of proves that there was two separate incidences, because they're not saying they were a part of anything from 7 to 8. But that's when most of the reports
during that time. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, yeah, that is interesting.
Some say the answer lies with the Maryland National Guard, which says it was conducting flare exercises on the Barry Goldwater test range outside Phoenix that night.
Right, UFO. That is one of the main explanations for what happened during Phoenix lights. Could have been one, multiple craft. There was all kinds of different, things seen. The most popular being the V-shaped craft, but there were other craft, mile wide, this, that, the other, whatever.
So when I saw this technology, I know there's nothing on this planet like that. There's no capacity to fly a craft. It wasn't even flying. How could something be lifted by air going that slow? Not possible.
My nephew Damien said that he probably could have thrown like a tennis ball or a rock up and hit it. It was that close. At the time, there was this house that was being constructed up on the hill, and there was a telephone pole, and the craft flew like right over the top. There was no sound, like even the neighborhood was really quiet. Like the only sound that there ever was that there was a small, just like a small propeller plane that flew over the top of it, pretty high up. It looked like this big in comparison. But yeah, that was the only sound at any point.
Another explanation was flares, right? This Operation Snowbird that the Maryland Air National Guard came out and said they were performing that night, and that's what people saw.
Our A-10 Thunderbolts that are right behind me were on a night illumination exercise over the Barry Goldwater Range Complex southwest of Phoenix, and they were dropping high-intensity flares that deploy on a little parachute and descend to the earth. And we think that those flares were mistakenly called UFOs by the folks in the valley in Phoenix there.
Trouble is, the Barry Goldwater test range is on the backside of the Australian mountains. The lights were seen in front of the mountains.
Our unit was flying March 13th, 1997 as part of Operation Snowbird, and we were conducting night training.
At no point the lights disappear above the ridge of the mountain, and at no point the lights descend below the ridge of the mountain. The disappearance of the light coincides precisely with the point in time when the light is exactly at the top of the mountain. And that happens not with one light, not with two lights, but with all the lights that we see on the videotape. Therefore, the only conclusion we have is that those lights are behind the mountains, not in front of the mountains.
I did just come across something interesting.
Okay.
And you can check this out. If you go to that link, just do a control find for Snowbird. This looks like it was published in 1979, which talks about a different National Guard participating in something called Operation Snowbird out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is the Tucson Air Force Base. So it does predate the Phoenix Lights by nearly 20 years, proving that Operation Snowbird was a real thing and was occurring far
like they didn't just make it up for this event, you're saying?
Yes.
I see. There was also this thing, top secret balloon. I can't remember what that thing was called, that accidentally escaped from California. I can't remember.
That was that the JP Aerospace?
Yeah, something like that.
Like the
remember
giant
that? We were
inflatable V?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it was made by JP Aerospace.
The year is 1991. Birds and people are living together in seemingly perfect harmony, until one day a young man catches fire. This is Phoenix.
Let's finish with the explanation. So we got UFOs, right, was one explanation given for what happened with the Phoenix Lights. Flares was another explanation given for what happened with the Phoenix Lights. This giant inflatable V from JP Aerospace potentially was given as a potential explanation for the Phoenix Lights.
A UFO?
I mean, technically that's a UFO too, right? An illegal training, right? Potentially. Right. I think that's what we sort of determined. Canadian snowbirds flying team practicing for an air show, potentially being one explanation that has been presented before, maybe minimally, but we're presenting it here in this video as a possible explanation for what we might say is the second half of the lights. No?
The first half.
First half. Got it. So the air show training's the first half. Second is the flares, potentially, as the leading, right, what you think. Okay.
An article from Reader's Digest, May 1998, has the exact answer. If these witness statements are true, Then we have the smoking gun to the V-shaped craft event at 8:30. The crew of an America West Airlines flight radioed to the Air Traffic Control Center in Albuquerque. It was a formation of CT-144 Tudors that were flying at 19,000 feet. Someone claiming to be a pilot in the formation radioed the America West co-pilot and said, "We're Canadian snowbirds flying Tudors." Now, of course, the Canadian snowbirds are going to deny any involvement, saying we don't travel in V-shaped formations and we don't cruise with landing lights on. I mean, it would be terrible PR for them. They're in foreign airspace and caught in the middle of an international UFO incident. So what evidence do we have that supports the idea that this was a formation of CT-144 airplanes? So that brings us to eyewitness Mitch Stanley. He had his swiveling, moving telescope ready that night to view the Hale-Bopp comet. His story ran in the Phoenix New Times on June 26, 1997. Through that telescope, Mitch saw that they were planes. He said what looked like individual lights to the naked eye actually split into two under the resolving power of the telescope. The lights were located on the underside of squarish wings. Mitch's story also ran in the Arizona Republic newspaper. He said, again, they were planes. He could see they had square wings. And this article says 3 lights. He said 1 on each wing and 1 underneath the fuselage. So as you can see here, these planes have a big headlight in front. You can also notice the squared off wings. And here you can see the 2 white light configuration on the wings and the single headlight on the fuselage. But stunt pilots or fighter pilots wouldn't think of flying in a formation to act like a UFO.
So we would go out at night flying around on goggles and you'd see a campfire and you go, oh, UFO time. And then you get the airplane going about 600 knots and then you pull the power back to idle so you can't hear it. And you get zinging towards the fire. Well, you turn the lights are all down because we're in restricted areas, so we can do that. And there's lights on it that you can only see if you're on night vision goggles. So the other airplanes can see us, but no one else can see us. Then you go zinging at it. And then right when you get to the campfire, you pull the airplane into the vertical, you stroke the afterburners, you let them light off, you count to 3, you pull them off, and then you just go away. Instant UFO reporting.
And then maybe all that's bullshit and it was just a bunch of UFOs. What if the UFOs were using cloaking technology to look like they like Transformers and they wanted to look like the Canadian snowbirds flying around? John, have you thought about that? You haven't, have you?
Digital Transformers.
Boom. I just boomed it, y'all. I just bam.
You just blew the lid off this.
Yep. Vetted. We're done. Yeah. So, all right. Am I missing any other explanations, popular explanations? That's it, right?
Well,
these are the leading
explanations or descriptions by the witnesses. Are you classifying those as separate things? Because the witnesses claimed to have seen a mile-wide physical craft.
Yeah, that's in the first one. That's in the UFOs, right? That's in the UFO category, you know, ET crap, whatever, all the different shapes and sizes, you know, right there, other shapes and stuff, right? Like, clearly there was a lot described going on. So, yeah, that's all in one, you know, UFOs was one explanation for, right? So we got UFOs, flares, giant inflatable V, and this Canadian snowbirds.
I think those are, I think
maybe, right? I don't know. I think that's it. I don't know of anything. Flares and UFOs being the leading, the other two being maybe fringe. You could say fringe idea. Interesting, compelling explanations.
Time is about 10 o'clock, Sue?
Yes.
10 o'clock, March 13th, Thursday night. Isn't that weird? Look at that. And they all went on in a sequence, too. Now, the thing that puzzles me is they can't be ordinary streetlights. They're going off now, right?
Yeah,
one
went
drop.
off.
The thing that's amazing is that it must be so bright that they would carry, because we're looking at about 25 miles away. The middle one now.
There one. Oh,
The two
another
are-
one.
There's another one.
Yep,
Last
there
one?
goes one.
We got the last one left. Still burning.
And usually we've seen them over.
It's gone.
What are some other, things that you would want to say about this, Phoenix Lights situation? Something we didn't cover, or something you want to make sure, any of y'all want to bring up?
Something that I would like to say, and I'm not a skeptic or a disbeliever in the phenomenon, right? But there are specific cases that I think we need to just look at with a close lens and, make a decision about what we think happened based on whatever facts are available. And unfortunately for the Phoenix Lights, the facts are mostly eyewitness testimony. And my uncle, who's a lawyer, has always said something that I think is really funny, but he said that in a courtroom, eyewitness testimony is one of the worst forms of evidence you can have. And I'd like to tie that into a couple of ways that people describe what they saw with the Phoenix Lights. People say that they saw a V-shaped craft, a solid triangle object with 5 to 7 lights in a V shape. And they also say that they saw individual light sources flying across the sky. Well, Phoenix is a big city, and there's no lack of light pollution and pollution in general here. In fact, nowadays, when I go out at night, if the moon is out, I can barely see any stars at all. So if a bright light or a series of lights were to fly overhead, bright enough for me to focus in on, my eyes might adjust to not even seeing the stars and lights above them. So when people say that they saw a hard but nuts and bolts craft flying across the sky, I think that it's possible that people may have seen a series of lights. I personally think that there's probably a prosaic explanation for what those lights were, but just by seeing them, they might not be seeing the stars above them and trick themselves into thinking that they're seeing a physical craft. Another thing that you brought up, and I know that you're
Another awesome, smart thing I brought up. Yeah, please
yeah,
continue.
super smart.
Yeah,
Which is that
please.
people get confused about what the Phoenix Lights was. Was it one incident? Was it two incidents? And the media doesn't do a really great job of sort of separating that.
Sure.
Again, back to eyewitness testimony, I think that our minds and our experiences have a hard time separating that. So now imagine that you're out with your family and you see a very strange, unusual formation of lights flying overhead, and you're excited and you grab your family and you say, "Come out here, honey, come look at this," right? And then by the time everybody gets out there and notices it, it's gone. But then you're out all night waiting to see something else. And you see a series of really bright lights high up in the sky, far off in the distance. And those stay there for a good amount of time. And maybe that they're 20, 30 miles away. And when you see how far across the sky they are, you're thinking, oh my God, that must be huge. You wake up the next morning and you might think to yourself, what we saw was huge. And I think that that's just human nature. And it's a part of the evidence gathering that's happened, that maybe people think they saw a mile-wide craft. Maybe that person just saw two things happen. And then when they woke up in the morning, their memories sort of blended together.
I mean, I guess that's possible. It's like you confused the opening band with the headliner, and you got
You
mixed
had a
up
couple
on
of
the
drinks.
songs.
I don't see why
Yeah.
that wouldn't happen.
Sure. No, that's interesting. Look, is there video? So the video footage that's like the main stuff that I use in the trailer for the Phoenix Lights, is that the only footage that's out there? And is that like, is there footage of both events, if you will?
So technically, yes, I think there is footage of both events, although there's not a lot in total, but there's significantly more of the second event than the first. It's very hard to come by anything that is easily discernible, but there are some videos that do show some form of a triangle-shaped formation of lights flying overhead.
Okay, look, if y'all can do me a favor, the only links to send me in our thing on Discord, just links to the video. If you know it's the first or second event, and if you can label that in you know what I mean? If you send the link and say, oh, this is the first event. Because I'm not sure the video I showed which event that is. If it's the lights earlier on or later on. Because are people thinking that these lights lasted for 3 hours?
No, no, absolutely not. The second event was something that I believe lasted no longer than several minutes to like 20 minutes or something like that. The first event, people saw something flying overhead, and if you were standing in Phoenix and you saw something fly overhead, that might last only 30 seconds or a minute, depending on what's obstructing your view.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so, yes,
Okay,
the
I
ones that
see.
you showed were the second event, which
Got
was
it. Because that's when they did the demonstration to show that the lights went behind the mountain using that
yeah,
footage, right?
yeah.
Okay, so that's the second. Okay, so what do you think exactly happened? Are you thinking that the first event was the training from these Canadian snowbirds, and the second event is the Maryland Air National Guard with the flares?
Doing something coincidentally also called Operation Snowbird.
Snowbird? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I think.
That's
I
kinda crazy too, right? Like, that these both events happened that night that cause you a mass UFO confusion, 2 different
Right.
event that is kind of, and they're both called snowbirds?
Very strange, but that is what I think, and
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
that
it's not
there's
any
also
stranger than aliens. I mean, it's not.
I guess you're right. It's not stranger than, interdimensional beings
Yeah,
somehow morphing and
sure. Although I find that very compelling, these big V-shaped craft coming over the city, Independence Day style. I mean, this is either when did Independence? I think this came out before
less than a
Independence Day
so in
or
no,
after.
Independence Day was less than a year before the Phoenix Lights.
Okay, so almost a year later,
Yeah,
this happens. Okay,
yeah.
dude, people definitely had Independence Day in their mind. Let's be
Oh,
real, because
absolutely.
that's the number one image is the UFO going over the city, like massive UFO
Yeah.
going over the city.
And Will Smith was
Um,
huge at the time. It was like the Will Smith summer blockbuster era of the 90s. And so the most
yeah,
recent blockbuster movie was Independence Day. And people
yeah,
probably thought that
that's interesting.
the Phoenix
I
Capitol
still
was
find
about
that
to get
exciting,
blasted.
though. I don't know. I still find it exciting. But would you still argue though that it's because you said that what makes it compelling is that it's still unresolved. So do you still think it's unresolved even though those are your two leading theories?
I do think that it's officially unresolved. I don't
Got
think
it.
Arrow has done a report on it to
Yeah,
close or leave the case open. And I don't think any other agency, military or government or otherwise, has put out a definitive statement to explain the entire process, the entire
got it.
event.
Got it. All right, I like that. Yeah. All right, that's interesting too. All right, part of the what we covered before, no real official investigation, right? No formal investigation into this. And regardless of what you think about it, it's a fact that something happened that night or a couple things happened that night and thousands of people called in and were witness to it, which is crazy that we wouldn't look, even if it is just to say officially it was the flares and here's the data to show and blah, blah, blah. And the first thing was these Canadian snowbirds, we slapped them on the wrist. We told them they shouldn't be training illegally, dogfighting in the desert, practicing their shows. I mean, whatever. That would be nice to have, right? That would be nice to come out and say, it's even the governor changing his story is so interesting, because he gives an official statement that a lot of people use for a long time about the Phoenix Lights, and then he's the guy to come out and go, well, actually, I was approached by some guys, I changed my story. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. What do you think about that?
So I would love to know more exactly what you mean by he was approached by somebody before he changed his story. What I do know about him is
Good
that
question. That's what I would have said.
he openly he openly mocked everybody who said they saw something, which I think is disrespectful, because thousands of people called in and they definitely saw something. And then months later, the Maryland National Guard admitted to doing something, but he came out before that happened with a guy in an alien costume, basically telling Arizona and the world that you were crazy for thinking you saw something, which is so on brand for how people are treated in the UFO community regardless.
Sure.
But then he did come out later and say specifically that he had an experience that he didn't know how to explain. So was what he saw the V flying overhead, or was what he saw the flare drop and he was still unaware of what that was at the time? I'm not sure.
That's the thing. I don't know if we'll ever. How certain are we that they're two separate events, as you would say?
So when you
On a
say,
scale,
yeah, so when you
100%,
say
on a scale of 100%.
we, I think that's really interesting, because I can tell you, I personally am 100% certain that there's two separate events. But when
Okay.
you say we as a community, I think it's very divided. And
There you
also
go.
I think that people just haven't seen enough information clearly laid out timelines to show what was taken credit for, and does that also account for all of the reports that happened before that. So
Yeah.
I think that the answer to your question in general is no, I don't think it's clear, but for me it is.
You being from Phoenix, you've heard stories, maybe family, this, that, too, it kind of rumbles through, and you just hear all this extra stuff that someone normally is not going to get. And just understanding the conditions of where you live and how that affects vision as well, and even the audible sound, right? Things can be blocked from mountains and it doesn't make its way, so muted, echoey, there could be a multitude of different anomalies that sort of affect this, and it's great to get context from you as well, and talk about it. Marcus, you're joining us here. What is your opinion on what happened at the Phoenix Lights? What do you think, man?
I mean, it was aliens.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
It wasn't aliens.
Yes, it wasn't aliens. But you think UFO, like ET crash, is still a potential leading possibility, or no? Are you pretty convinced it was like these flares, or what? What do you think?
I mean, I think there's always that 10% chance that I want it to be real.
Sure.
Until you get enough evidence, it's kind of hard to really say. But I think there's definitely some kind of cover-up going on. I don't know if it's, real UFOs or real aliens, but something was flying out there that wasn't supposed to be out there.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, that's a
I like the
different
way
kind
you
of
put
cover
that.
up, right?
Yeah.
There's something else, maybe not necessarily ET crap, but maybe some advanced tech that was flying around we were covering up and had nothing to do with flares. Or the flares were covering up. Wasn't that a theory too we talked about, where like something was happening and they were like, oh, quick, go drop flares?
Yeah.
They saw something. They saw the thing. Or they saw, or something. Maybe that's the two events. The first event is the real event that happened, the UFO event. And then the second event, it's flares. Okay, we can all admit that. No problem. But that was to cover up this first event, that was something. That's, I don't know.
I think that that's very possible. My theory is that there is a Canadian airplane fleet called the Snowbirds that was planning a tour around the United States just 1 month after the incident of the Phoenix Lights, where their first flights were going to be out of Nellis Air Force Base and Page, Arizona, all right around the area where the first sighting started. And then coincidentally, 1 month before they're supposed to start this huge tour around the country, they do a flight from Nellis Air Force Base, southern Nevada, to Tucson, Arizona, which is the exact same flight path as the sightings and reports from eyewitness testimonies. It gets a bit
You're saying
deeper.
that there is evidence that they flew that night, 100%.
I'm saying that there is an article that was published in the Reader's Digest where
Well,
pilot
that's
and
legit.
co-pilot
Reader's
Larry
Digest.
Campbell and
Yeah.
John Middleton did
Yeah.
have communication with the Canadian Snowbirds that night, and they were told from one of the pilots in the Canadian Snowbirds that they were on their way to the Tucson landing point.
Have any of these Canadian Snowbird pilots ever come forward?
I don't think so.
Well, if that was really the reason, the cover up worked for them, you know. I think
Do you think there would be a cover up for that though? Like to cover up this Canadian team flying around? I mean, they're basically like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels, or right?
Globetrot.
Essentially, they're the Harlem Globetrotters of the sky, and whatever. Like, I just don't see why you'd want to cover up. They went out on unofficial whatever practice flight thing they did and got busted, and then like, oh, let's cover this up, and oh shit, now it's turned into the largest mass UFO sighting in history. God damn it, why did we do this? That sounds
Maybe they didn't want bad press right before they go on this tour, although they should have just taken credit for it because it would have been the biggest tour of all time.
Well, bad press, their story comes out in Reader's Digest for Christ's sakes afterward. It's not like, this is major press even back then that this Canadian Snowbirds is going to go out on. It's not like Oprah was like, oh, let's do a 2-hour special on these guys. No, that just seems so, it just seems so interesting. Yeah, you'd want to just take credit, I think, at that point and see like, yeah, guys, come out to the show. It's going to be effing crazy. This is what, we do illegal shit.
They're flying.
What's up?
You know what kind of jets the Snowbirds were in?
Yeah,
I have pictures of them,
but
I don't know what they look like. Old World War II planes almost. The question is, why would they go train at night or at dusk even? That seems not smart. And right, and because all their shows are daytime shows. In fact, pretty early. If you go to air shows, they're early, dude, because that's the best time to fly, not at dusk. So that seems odd that they would go out on this, again, unofficial, unsanctioned training, exercise to practice for their air show, risking their whole tour getting shut down if it's so illegal and so whatever. So, man, I don't know, man. I don't buy the Canadian Snowbirds. I like it. It sounds cool. And maybe those guys lied and maybe they said Snowbird, but they got confused. They meant Snowbird, Operation Snowbird, these pilots or something. They are jetliner pilots.
That's possible, but
confused,
the direct quote does say that they're the Canadian Snowbirds.
That also seems weird. You're the pilot and you go, we're the Canadian Snowbirds, eh? I don't know, man.
Well, they also named the Operation Snowbird, Operation Snowbird.
That's what I'm saying.
Bizarre
exactly.
that would be on the same night.
Why would you admit it if you're out illegally doing this? That's like if you're out committing a crime and someone pulls up at a bus stop and you got your mask on with your buddy on a motorcycle or something, and they're like, "Hey, what's your name?" And you lift your mask up. Oh, Jim from down the street. While you're in the middle of a crime, like it doesn't make like they were literally doing something they shouldn't be doing, and they're just gonna tell this pilot, "Oh, we're the Canadian Snowbirds."
You know,
I don't know.
I
I don't know
like that.
pilot etiquette either.
Yeah, I like that analogy, but I do think that air safety laws have something to do with it. You know, could they have been flying in a formation that they shouldn't have been in? That could have been alarming to a military presence if they weren't aware that that was going to happen that night. Um, and then obviously this, you know, Larry Campbell, pilot of a 757 airliner, sees these guys and is unaware of what they are, and he says they're flying in a formation, and so he's alarmed, and he's like, I got to find out what's going on here, because like air safety, right? I've got passengers and I've got hundreds of people on my plane. We got to figure out
Yeah,
what's going on here.
sure.
and and then they somehow get in contact and they say, we're the Canadian Snowbirds Flying Tutors, and we're headed to the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which also just happens to be where Operation Snowbird is based out of.
Correct. Where the
It's
flare,
very bizarre.
that's the base where the flares came out of as
Yes,
well.
the
So
flare
basically,
exercise.
that particular base, what was it called again? Motham Davis, or what was it?
Davis-Monthan
Davis-Monthan Air Force
Air Force Base.
Base,
Yeah.
right?
You could
Is
call it
the
DMAFB.
That's too much.
It's not more than Davis-Monthan Air Force Base.
It's kind of true. All right, so this Air Force Base is the origin potentially of both of these events. The first one, they fly
Well,
out right from there, you're
I would
saying?
say that it's the origin of Operation Snowbird, but it was the destination of the Canadian Snowbird.
So they flew out of a different Nellis, you're saying,
Right, out of
potentially. They flew out
Nellis.
of Nellis Air Force Base and landed at Davis-Monthan. Is that typical to do, to go from one base to another like that on a training thing? Because that seems odd. Why wouldn't you go back to the same place? You got all your shit there.
You know, I do have a friend who's a pilot, and he goes off on his own solo trips. I've gone with him on trips before, and he'll very often just want to go do sightseeing. So he'll fly from Arizona to Utah and then spend a couple of days in Utah, and then he'll fly home a few days later. And if these guys were visiting from Canada and they've got a month to kill before their first show starts, I don't see why they wouldn't plan a little trip over Arizona. Although it is bizarre they would do it, you know, at dusk or once it's dark out, because
Are
not a
we
whole lot
saying
to
it
see.
was the whole squad or just a couple rogue members of this Canadian Snowbirds?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I would say that I don't know how big the whole squad is, but
Yeah.
if we
It's like
account,
7 or
you know,
8.
each light for, you know, one squad member, it would be about 7. You know, I think
Okay.
7 is the number of lights that people claim
Yeah.
to have seen in V-shaped formation.
That's how many they fly, 7 or 8, if I remember correctly from the videos and photos I have. All right, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, I can definitely see them practicing for the air show, the month coming out before this long tour. And I've been to these air shows myself. They're very intense. There's a lot happening. They fly so close. It's the precision is insane that they have to have. They literally have to be some of the most amazing pilots to do this stuff. Now, I just don't see why that stuff wouldn't be on the books and scheduled. And does that make sense? Like, and it be easy to verify, and they wouldn't have to hide it. They would just say, no, that was us flying around. Here you go. Because why wouldn't the news look into that? Why did nothing happen with that?
Well, that's an interesting point, and of course, I'm just going to be speculating now, and I don't know the logistics or FAA laws and regulations around commercial versus private versus
Sure.
international organizations flying in America, but there may not be any law in place that forces the Canadian Snowbirds to make Luke Air Force Base or the Maryland National Guard that was doing Operation Snowbird at the time. There may not be any laws in place that enforce them to, you know, announce that.
Inform them.
Yeah, to inform them ahead of time. So I'm not
Got it.
sure, but they definitely
interesting.
found out once, you know, thousands of calls were coming in.
Yeah. They're at the base, they get the phone call, and they look over at the the storage hangar of the planes, and it's just empty, and they're like, fuck. Like, yeah, I told those guys not to go out there, like, that's hilarious.
Dude, it was the 90s. You could do anything.
Yeah, it was the 90s, man. Oh God, that's hilarious. I mean, that's when it was popular. That's when I used to go to those Blue Angel shows. That shit was like in the 80s, I think, even too. That's also an interesting point. What are the rules and regulations that they would need to notify or not notify? I know when it comes to airspace, right, there is a lot of flight paths set ahead of time. You plot it, you're in communication. More when it comes to landing more than anything, but I know there's different laws for, altitudes and what needs to happen. And there are, if you're in military bases,
Yeah.
There's clearly a perimeter to which you're, allowed to operate in with
And that's a good
military
point, because
vehicles.
they did fly most likely from one military base to another. So it's not like they wouldn't know, right? It's I don't
They
think
would
you
know
just
we're going
land
to be
8
landing at this
jets
base.
landing
Yeah,
at this place.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like the guy sweeping the runway at the Davis Motham or whatever. He's like, just finishes sweeping up the last little dust. And then like, fucking hell, all these new planes land. He's like, what? No, they're not on the books, guys. What the hell? This is crazy. I'm supposed to meet, Jim Bob for a 12-pack right now. No, I
Gotta
got
go
to stay
sweep
with
the
these
whole
planes.
runway again.
Yeah, I got to sweep the whole runway again, guys. And first of all, why are we still sweeping runways, y'all? This is crazy. Has no one seen how long a runway is? Look how big my broom is. This is not work. Yeah. We need a
Like,
we
even
need
the hockey
plane.
rink, he's got a vehicle. Why can't
He's
I
got
get a car?
yeah, he's got a
I need a
Zamboni, dog. Can I not get something? I say we install brooms on the bottom of planes, so when they land, they literally sweep it for us. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
I'm just on the outer edges of the wheels. You know what I mean? It's got just a little extra, gives it like a vacuum cleaner, bro. You know what I mean? That's literally how vacuum cleaners work. So
There's
anyway,
the street cleaners.
yeah,
Can you hear
there
me
are,
right now?
dude, street cleaners.
Yep.
Yes. No, I hear you, Marcus. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's
We
funny.
never talked about the whole inflatable thing. Do you want to talk about
No,
that?
bring it up. I mean, we did bring it up as one of the explanations, but please, yeah, what do you talk to us a little bit more about that? Because I
mainly,
put, yeah, go ahead.
mainly just GPA did not admit to having it there, for one. It was still in production in 1997. It was also in production in California, not in Phoenix, Arizona.
So the gist of it is basically that JP Aerospace was working on this giant inflatable V, and they stored it. It had a tether, like a tether or whatever, and they were storing it in California. And one of the theories is potentially that escaped on its own, or somebody let it out, something, and it flew all the way and caused this whole Phoenix Lights incident, right? Got to Nevada, got to Tucson, Phoenix, right? All of it. And then went back to the storage facility in California, or what happened to it?
Well, yeah, I never found anything really on that, but people speculate
Like, where did it
about
go?
that. It didn't go
Wouldn't
anywhere.
JP Aerospace be able to say, no, we got all our balloons here? We only have two of them.
They didn't have it stored on a tether. They had it stored inside of a large warehouse. Inside.
But you would know if one's missing.
Right, you would know if it's missing. It's huge. Also,
So they never reported one missing.
They never did. They said that they had nothing to do with it, but they did say maybe the government or the army or something could have made one with similar technology, or some mad balloon scientist made his own and
mad balloon. We're gonna take over the world, one balloon at a time.
It's a real Pinky in the Brain situation for sure.
Yeah,
but
He got kicked out of the hot. You know what? That's a good theory, Marcus, because in Arizona, hot air balloons are a big deal. We have hot air balloon races out here, and maybe this guy got 86th from the hot air balloon community and decided I'm going on my own. I don't want a flying balloon. I want a flying V.
There are like tethered balloons in downtown Phoenix, aren't there? On top of buildings. I thought I saw a video of one at one point.
You know, maybe like car dealerships or something might do something like that for, you know, marketing or
maybe.
advertising, but I don't think I've seen any large balloons attached to buildings.
One more thing on it is those things are made to go straight up. They're not made to really go horizontally. That means it would have covered a lot of land just
thousands
by
of miles. It would have had to travel thousands of miles. And again, where did it go afterwards?
I don't know. It could have shot it down with a gun pretty easily, probably.
A BB
somebody
gun.
could have shot. Somebody could. I just think JP would know. Okay, they said they weren't missing one. So now the question become, oh, a rogue mad scientist built one in his garage and released it to coincide with these flares. Because remember, the Maryland Air National Guard said, no, we went out and shot flares. So, you know, I don't know. I definitely don't buy that one as one of the explanations. I definitely don't think it was this giant inflatable V like at all. That to me is
what's really weird is if it was flares, there's people that were seeing it going from, you know, Nevada all the way to Tucson.
Yeah.
And there were people that could see it. There were people that could see it, like the witness that was the Kelly family that I was talking about. They were in Glendale.
The Lay family or the Kelly family?
The Kelly family. They're the last ones to see it. So like the Lay family, I believe, was the second. Or no, they were the third, and then the police officer was the second. But they're roughly both. Well, the police officer was in Paulden. What was it called?
Paulden. Yeah, Paulden.
Okay, and then the Lay family was in North Phoenix, and I believe they're also the family that said they saw lights being fired down to the ground, like beams of light.
Oh, okay. The Lay family. Yeah, they say a lot of things.
Which is odd because I thought if it was flares, you know, it would be falling down, and the flares didn't come down until 10 o'clock, roughly.
And they went behind the mountain. I do believe that those lights went behind the mountain.
And another thing was a guy that was on his motorcycle was coming back or going to Phoenix from Tucson, and he saw it at the same exact time as this Kelly family seen it in Glendale, which is like a 70-mile difference. They could both see it from 70 miles apart, meaning it must have been super large, at least. But it really does show in the timeline that it's being moved from north to south.
Or north to south, exactly. North to south, exactly. Yeah.
And what was the wind like that day? Because on MUFON, I thought I read there was no wind that day, but then
you're talking about a large area, so wind could be different. Wind, you know what I mean? It's not going to be the same. Wind can be different from 10 feet to the next 10 feet.
Or in 10 minutes, the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, or 10 minutes. Yeah, exactly. It happened over hours, over hundreds of square miles.
I think to Marcus's point, I did see a podcast with a guy named Mikey who was part of the Travis Walton incident. He watched Travis Walton get abducted. Mikey's a firm believer that whatever the V-shaped craft or lights was an inflatable. He's very confident in that. And in the podcast episode that I saw, he also shows what he believed were air patterns from that day. And the wind patterns appeared to show a very similar path to exactly what the witnesses were reporting from Paulden to North Phoenix all the way down to Tucson. So
I just don't. How do you confuse an inflatable up in the sky with a mile-wide UFO?
Eyewitness testimony is not very reliable.
That's
true.
that's not unreliable. That's like fucking retarded. Pardon my language.
Okay, I know
I
you're
mean,
cutting that out.
when you have 10,000 people
I
saying,
mean,
Did you ever watch Arrested Development?
oh yeah.
You just got to throw it in there, like that episode where they just start bleeping Job.
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
goes on like a tirade of bleeping.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to be just, again, pardon my French, retarded to confuse an inflatable with this mild, I just don't see. I don't buy the
Yeah.
inflatable
Well, that is one
story.
of the things that's so fascinating. And earlier you said what makes this so compelling.
Yeah.
We have eyewitness testimonies of people claiming that this was coming through an area called the Dreamy Draw, which is a very famous part of like Arizona highway infrastructure. It's a very
Oh.
cool area that kind of weaves in between these mountains, in North Phoenix and very, very close to like Paradise Valley and North Phoenix and Scottsdale, that area. But anyways, people say that they saw it flying through that, which would be, I mean, these mountains, Arizona mountains, are very short. It would have
Yeah.
been hundreds of feet high, right? Versus all of the videos and things that I've seen show something very, very high up in the sky. And then there's lots of other testimony of people thinking something was flying right over their house. And so that is something that I find compelling, is that there was a drastic variation between what people reported.
I couldn't have. I totally agree. The
it's also
variation
really
in
odd.
the different stories.
What's also
Yeah, go
really
ahead,
odd
Marcus.
is, these were A-10 warthogs that were supposedly dropping these flares, which are super
Those are
loud.
massive planes.
Yeah, they're really loud, and you would think there would have been plenty of people that heard it simultaneously just seeing these flares coming by.
Dude, I have video footage of them shooting out flares, and they shoot out like a bazillion at one time.
Yeah, they can do like this whole balloon out type thing, or they
It goes,
can rapidly drop
you
them.
know.
They don't drop them like
'Cause-
one every so often. Usually, they're either drop them single filed super fast, or they drop them
Yeah.
in a whole shebang.
Well, it's like in two shebangs. There's the first shebang, and then within a few seconds they do another. But it's like
There's a lot of shebangs.
There's a lot of shebangs, going
Shebang,
on.
bang, bang. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot. And what I also find interesting, because that goes against this news footage again that I saw of this local news crew right after the Phoenix Lights happening, going out to the test range, watching them do another flare drop, and it matched identically to the Phoenix Lights. It was separated. There was just the 5 or 6 or whatever it was, and it looked identical. As I'm saying that right now, if this was a cover up, that's what you would do. You'd go, yeah, make it look like the other night, Joe, so that they buy it, the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm just saying, the other footage, I can't find any footage of A-10s dropping out flares like that one at a time slowly. Yeah. So
all I can think is if they're
I
on
don't know.
parachutes, then maybe they perfectly just floated apart to the point that they stayed level but still
I
far
see.
enough apart. Which
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how well that would work or how far they would go horizontally and stay in that same formation. There's just not a lot of movement going on when you're looking at them. You would think that there would be at least some windiness, or they would definitely come closer or farther apart easier. Sorry, I'm over here. Well, there we go. Yep.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
mean, well, if they're on little parachutes, that makes sense that the way they're falling would look like that, in my opinion. If they weren't on parachutes, then I might see something else going on. But I'm not saying it doesn't look like flares, and I'm not saying that's not the case. But if I'm just playing all sides, there are still some interesting points against it, but also for it. That is one of the things that makes this case so compelling, is that even the the basic prosaic explanation still has questions. It's still questionable,
Right.
which is still interesting,
Well, so I think Marcus brought this up earlier that I think without a doubt things happened, right? People saw something in the sky
Yeah,
from
exactly.
7 o'clock to 8:30. Then they saw something in the sky again after 10 o'clock. And I think without a doubt, it was covered up because the governor came out and said, "You guys are all crazy. You didn't see anything." And
Yeah.
then a few months later, there was a press release saying that, yes, the Maryland National Guard was doing something called Operation Snowbird. So in the moment, it was absolutely covered up. It was denied and covered up, absolutely without a doubt. Why would they do that? And then why would they do something? The flares that were dropped that fell behind the mountain, that's like 20 plus miles south of Phoenix. That's a pretty far distance away. So I don't think you would hear any jet, no matter how big or small it is, from that far away. But they would know that this would be visible from the entire Phoenix metropolitan area. Why would they do that and not tell anybody and just let people freak out? So I think without a doubt something happened. There was some form of a cover up, and it's still unresolved. And I don't know if there ever will be an official explanation for it.
Oh no, the further we get away from the origin date, if you will, the
Less
that
likely.
probability, it
Yeah.
goes down, right? Because all the evidence, witnesses, testimony, records deteriorates more as
Right.
time goes on. But it is an interesting case. And I mean, it is, in some way, it's a little more romantic that it doesn't get solved because it can be whatever you want still in your head.
Yeah, that's
When
the
you look at
thing.
the case. Yeah, that's
Do
it.
you guys know if Kurt Russell was the fifth witness? Because I have a guy that was in a Cessna who reported it at 8:20, a near collision.
A near collision.
That's what number 5 was apparently. A
A
Cessna
near collision.
reporting a near collision with light, and all I can think is Kurt Russell. That's probably who it was.
I don't remember
He
him
wasn't
telling that story of like, because in his mind it was not a big deal. Oh, we saw some lights. I don't know what it is. I reported it. We landed, got in our car, went home, never thought about it.
He didn't call it a near collision, but maybe that's how they reported it at the
That's
reporting center.
interesting. Or there was another pilot in a Cessna who,
Yeah, that's another possibility.
had a
Kinda
near
curious
collision. I mean,
about.
that would change things, right? You had a near collision. Near collision with what? With one of the flares, or the lights, or
And that's another thing. Like, you can't just go dropping flares over an area where there are planes flying.
well, if it's the 8:30, you said his was at 8:20. That would be the
8:20.
The first one.
the first set of lights, which could be potentially these Canadian snowbirds flying around. So a near collision with one of these, again, I find that unlikely too because they're in the same airspace.
Yeah, also you'd probably be able to tell it's a plane, but
Yeah.
Well, I
wasn't
mean, at
reported.
night, I think the only way you can tell it's another aircraft is based on the lights that you have on each side. And I think a
Right.
lot of reports show, are people saying that they just saw one light coming from, I believe each object, or just, these singular light sources shining straight down, which would be something, akin to landing lights, not the actual lights at the tips of the wings that flash and alternate. Um, I do think that the Canadian snowbirds denied that they fly with those on, but that is what
I agree.
one of the theories is.
Why are they flying at night? These Canadian snowbirds. Again, you know what I mean? That's dangerous. I'm gonna look for video footage of them flying at night. See if that exists. Look into that. is there training? I realize there are training exercises at night. I'm not saying that. But this is a early daytime air show. You're going to practice in the same environment that you're going to be performing your show in.
Yeah.
Why
But
would you put yourself in danger?
It doesn't necessarily mean that they're practicing for the show, though. You know, they're in town a month early, and maybe they just wanted to go on a
Joyriding.
little trip. Yeah, a little joyride. And then they're like, you know what would be funny? What if we just turned on our landing lights? Nobody in Phoenix knows we're here. Why don't we just fly over the whole city and scare everyone? Which also sounds illegal. But
you think they? I mean, definitely, right? Like, do you think? I mean, that sounds crazy that they would.
I don't think that any pilot would do that. They would risk their license, you know.
Pilots do stupid shit too. Like, there's dumb people in every profession, right? Let's be real.
Okay.
Even pilot. There's idiots and there's idiot pilots. There has to be. The ones that crash planes. Those are idiots. For the most part. Come on, you crash a plane. Let's maybe not all of them. I mean,
taking risks.
There's
but you know what else is know what else is funny? I did see a clip. I think it was David Fravor talking about pranking people in the middle of nowhere in his jet, where he would manufacture a UFO sighting, and then him and his boys would all think it's hilarious.
I mean, when I went to Roswell and I went to the little alien, and the guy that worked there, I asked him if he saw any UFO sightings, and all he said was the pilots like to zoom past the little alien and on the highway there and say hello, basically, right? Like their way of whatever. Yeah. So yeah, maybe, let's be real. If I was a pilot, I could see myself doing some shit like that.
Yeah.
Playing a prank or two. Like, you see that guy down there on the bicycle? Watch this, y'all. Oh, watch this, and just vroom. Oh shit, he had a baby with him. You would play pranks. I could totally see that. Military people are very much into pranks, so I mean, maybe that's possible. Could one of the guys said, "Hey, they could have also just done it unknowingly. They're putting on the light, not thinking anything about it, and but how does that account for all the sightings all over the place? Right.
So, I mean, really. I do think that if they flew from Nellis or from Southern Nevada to Tucson, I think that would account for nearly the identical flight path for the series of eyewitness testimonies that came in for the first event.
Interesting. So do you think for the second event, a lot of people just like, oh no, that's flares? Or were they like, oh, it's happening again?
That's what I think it was. Yeah. Absolutely, that's what I think it was. If I went out and saw a very strange formation, even a V-shaped formation, which is just something you don't see ever, right? I have never once seen anybody flying in a V-shaped formation outside of an air show. And if you see this with bright lights up in the sky, way up overhead, you would absolutely be interested and intrigued by it. And maybe you get a phone call from somebody who says, I just saw a UFO. And you're like, dude, I'm looking at a UFO right now. This is crazy. And that's already in your mind. Nobody was thinking flares. Of course not. And then they see something off in the sky an hour and a half later. They think it's UFOs again.
They're back.
Did you say it's illegal? Illegal to fly in a V formation, especially over like the city?
I would need to check the FAA regulations, but I do think that it is something that you're not supposed to do.
They do it in their air shows for sure.
Right, but
their air shows have the formations, and they clearly have to practice that.
Yeah,
outside the air show, so there must be a way to do it. Probably on protect right. A lot of that.
NASCAR goes 200 miles an hour, right? And they practice going 200 miles an hour, but they don't do that on the highway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would imagine where they're flying, if they're flying from one military base to the other, their flight path is like clean sailing. We can do what we're supposed to do, right? Essentially, because I don't think anything happened over the city.
What do you mean?
Was there people saying that these lights flew over the city of Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So from 8 o'clock to 8:30, sightings from North Phoenix, starting actually at something called Lake Pleasant, that's just 45 minutes north of Phoenix, which was where the airliner said that they saw the Canadian snowbirds, then over to North Phoenix, then through the Dreamy Draw area, which is going right down basically the middle of Phoenix, north to south. And then it went over, nearby Tempe, Arizona, and then down southeast towards Tucson. So yeah, it absolutely went, 40, 50 miles over city. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe they were like, we're out of town and we're just going to fly over Phoenix, see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Right? That'd be something you would do logically. Like, oh, look, we're here at Phoenix. That's it. Phoenix Lights. I don't know. All right, final thoughts, guys.
There's always more to say on it, but there's always more to pull up on it. But
always.
I did just watch that movie about it, and I didn't really. There's just like a 911 operator on there that talks about all the stuff that you already know, pretty much.
Oh.
Final thoughts for me. If you're in the Canadian snowbirds and you see this, come clean. That's my final thoughts.
Please. And your buddies that did this. I agree. Come out and just say it. You could end the madness.
You guys are sick.
Yeah, you guys are sick. You ruined
well, thanks for having me on,
lives.
Patrick. This was really fun. It was fun to just dive in and try and find out new information. A lot of the stuff that I shared with you and that I now sort of am integrating into what I believe happened, I found because we started doing research on this particular project. So I appreciate that. It was really fun to do that. And it was fun to sit here and talk with you and Marcus.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hi guys, I'm Daniel Clancy. I'm one of the moderators for Vetted Podcast on YouTube, and I also help run the Discord. And I want to invite you to join in our next vetted case, the Min Min Lights. The Min Min Lights are a mysterious phenomena observed in the outback regions of Australia, particularly in Queensland, named after a small settlement and hotel near Boulia, where they were first reported in the early 20th century. These lights appear as glowing orbs at night, hovering just above the horizon. Typically described as white, yellow, or red, and varying in size, witnesses have noted the lights moving rapidly, floating, or even following them, with the sights being reported consistently over the past century.
Chef, no. Chef, I'm really scared.
Dad, no, we have to keep driving.
Oh my God.
We're not stopping. And it's gone again.
It's gone again. Chef, I'm really freaked out. It's gone
Dad,
again.
Dad, we're really scared.
It keeps chasing us.
The origin and nature of the Min Min Lights remains unexplained, becoming part of a local folklore. Some accounts suggest the lights can persist for hours, while others note their sudden disappearance.
Definitely not.
It's back again. It's back again.
Oh my God. Where is it now?
Right in the background. Yes.
Despite numerous sightings over the years, the scientific explanations are lacking. Reports of the phenomena span across Australia, from Brewarrina in New South Wales to Boulia in Queensland, with frequent sightings in Channel Country and Yunta, South Australia, and the Pilbara region of Western Australia, particularly in an area known as Pyramid Station. Now, I find this case personally fascinating as someone who grew up in Western Australia and has personally heard of accounts from several people of the Min Min Lights, including from within my own family. Remember, every month we research a brand new UFO topic on the Discord with the help of our members, and we'd love to have you join us and research a topic that most people don't even know about. If you aren't a part of our Discord server yet, go to discord.gg/vetted. Link in the description.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.